25 no-tool ways to grow more and work less, using your hands and things already lying around the place. We are covering weeds, water, plant growth, and harvest. And by the end, I'll give you the check that tells you when a hand method saves work and when it is just moving the trouble somewhere else. Pull weeds in hard, dry soil, and the root breaks, so you get to pull it again. Pile mulch too deep or wet leaves every evening, and you can end up with waterlogged soil or more leaf disease. And a loaded plant on a loose branch frame can fall into the path. Tools are not the enemy. Hands are not magic. Timing, touch, and using what is already in the garden can prevent a bigger job, but hard soil and heavy loads are where tools earn their keep. I've gardened since I was 15, and I run my own place by watching what creates the next job. We'll start with your hands as a ruler, then sowing, thinning, and planting. Seed packets usually give the final spacing between mature plants, not the distance for every seed at sowing. So sow small seed a little closer, then thin once you can see which seedlings are strongest. Pinch or lift the extras and leave the plants you keep roughly a handspan apart, adjusting for the crop, the soil, and how much pruning you will do. That saves guessing at the start and stops a crowded row taking water and nutrients from the plants meant for harvest. After 55 years, I would rather choose seedlings early than feed a tangled row all season. A handspan is a useful garden measure, not a sacred unit. It helps you adapt. It does not excuse ignoring the room a crop needs. Trying to push a seedling into dense clay or stony soil can damage roots and leave air pockets because your hands cannot form a proper hole. Only transplant by hand where the soil opens readily. Scoop soil aside with both hands, set the seedling at depth judged by your fingertip, then press soil gently around the roots. If it resists, use a suitable tool first, and if you only have a few plants, this is where precision pays most. Check one bed for crowded seedlings and workable soil. Hand weeding depends on that same soil moisture, and mulch only saves work when its depth is right. Pull young weeds after a soaking rain or deep watering when the soil gives a little. Get your fingers close to the ground and pull steadily, then check for the root. If it stays behind, the weed will return and the job starts again. But large, woody, or deeply rooted weeds in hard soil can strain tendons and injure the small joints in your wrists and fingers because they are taking the force needed to overcome both root and soil resistance. Stop before it becomes a wrestling match. Use a hoe or hand tool instead. Hand weeding is a timing method, not a test of toughness. If you have heavy clay, that objection is fair. Loosen compacted ground with a suitable tool, then pull by hand when the soil is workable. Cover bare soil with healthy clippings, leaves, or chopped prunings 2 to 4 inches deep. That blocks light, holds moisture, and reduces repeated annual weeds. Keep mulch away from stems, trunks, and shrub bases. More than about 4 inches can restrict water and air, leaving roots shallow. Check one patch after watering. If the root breaks or the soil stays hard, mark it for tool-assisted loosening. Before turning every scrap into mulch or buried compost, watch for slugs, horsetail, and animals. A tidy pile is not automatically better than a rough layer in the bed. I run my own place, and every bucket carried away is work that has left the garden. Before leaving thick organic mulch, remember that damp layers can harbor slugs and snails, which may transmit parasites or pathogens to pets or wildlife that eat them. Deep mulch against trunks also keeps bark wet, encouraging rot. So chop soft garden growth and spread it evenly, thinner around vulnerable seedlings, no deeper than about 4 inches. Use it more freely in dry climates, and watch slug numbers in damp or maritime weather. Before using corrugated cardboard, check for horsetail or equisetum. It can flourish in the corrugations and spread. Where horsetail is absent, Overlap 3 or 4 sheets of newspaper or suitable cardboard so light is blocked. Alternate green and brown layers and finish with brown material. Before burying food waste or non-composted manure, shallow burial can attract dogs, cats, raccoons, and rodents, causing digging and possible pathogen exposure. Bury it at least 12 inches deep, rotate the site, or use a 12 to 18-inch trench. Skip large amounts in shallow beds, raised beds, or containers where they displace roots and create airless pockets. That turns cleanup into soil cover and fertility. Next, we move to watering placement, where the question is whether water lands on leaves or roots. The clock is not the whole rule. Repeated evening overhead watering leaves foliage wet overnight, giving fungal spores a good chance to germinate and enter the leaves, which can increase mildews and leaf spots on susceptible plants. So, when you water overhead, aim for early morning, roughly between 5 and 9. The leaves have time to dry, and water can soak into the soil before midday evaporation takes it away. But if evening is the only time you have, do not leave the plants thirsty to obey a slogan. Put the hose or can at the base and water the soil, not the leaves. Wet the root zone properly instead of sprinkling the surface again and again. Base watering in the evening reduces leaf wetness risk, but it does not remove disease risk if humid air sits over saturated soil. In hot or dry weather, necessary water matters more than a rigid clock rule. Native plants can need water during establishment and extreme drought too. On my own place, I watch where the water lands. The garden does not consult a clock before rain arrives. For 1 week, notice the time, whether the leaves or soil get wet, and whether foliage is still wet later. That tells you more than panic does. And once water is placed properly, your fingers can start directing where the plant spends its growth. Once water is placed properly, your fingers can direct where the plant spends its growth. Pinch a soft growing tip after a few sets of leaves, and the side buds get the chance to make a bushier plant. Remove small tomato suckers or excess cucumber shoots while they are still pliable, before they become a tangled shading job. But moving from a visibly diseased plant to a healthy one can carry pathogens on your fingers into fresh wounds. Wash your hands between them, and do not rely on hand pinching when infection is visible. Deadhead spent flowers down to the next bud, a leaf, the basil rosette, or the daylily stalk base, depending on how that plant grows. Many plants then keep flowering instead of completing seed formation. Leave some seed heads for wildlife, though, and remember that deadheading biennials stops them setting seed and returning the following year. Harvest outer leaves and herbs above active growing points. That is cut and come again. Roots do not work that way, and determinate fruiting plants have a finite production period. After 55 years gardening, my rule is simple. Ask whether the plant is making leaves, flowers, seed, or finishing, then remove what blocks the result you want. And if your hands hurt, use ergonomic pruners or long-handled tools. The method is optional. Now we move from shaping growth to establishing roots, then keeping loaded plants standing. Dense clay or stony soil will not form a proper hole by hand, and forcing in a seedling can damage roots and leave air pockets. Loosen that ground with a suitable tool first. In loose soil, scoop a hole with both hands, place the seedling, and press soil gently around the roots. Your fingers can feel when the root ball is snug without pancaking the surface. An unsecured branch support can topple under wind or plant weight, and broken branches can puncture gardeners, children, or pets. Remove sharp breaks, anchor the frame firmly, and give it a gentle push before adding weight. Sort straight prunings for stakes and flexible branches for hoops. Willow, twigs, and string can make a useful frame for peas, beans, flowers, or bushy plants. Twine left tight as stems thicken can girdle them, causing dieback or whole stem failure. Use soft, elastic twine with room to expand. Then check every tie as the plant grows. A tidy garden can use neatly selected branches and discreet green ties. I run my own place, and prunings save a purchase and a trip, provided the frame is not pretending to be a bridge. Heavy grapevines, large indeterminate tomatoes, strong wind, wet weather, or a support beside a path need sturdier hardware. That brings us to the final test. When does no-tool gardening save work? And when does it move trouble into hard soil, wet mulch, failed harvest, or collapse? Use 4 checks before committing to a hand method. First, feel the soil. Damp, workable ground favors hand weeding and transplanting. Hard, dry, stony soil can leave roots behind, damage seedlings, and strain your hands. Use a tool. Second, check climate and mulch. Dry conditions make organic cover useful for holding moisture. Damp conditions can turn thick chop and drop into slug and snail habitat, while mulch deeper than about 4 inches can restrict air and water. Thin it, move it from stems and trunks, or keep it away from vulnerable seedlings. Third, know the crop. Leafy crops and some indeterminate plants can keep producing after partial harvest. Root crops and determinate fruiting plants have a finite production period. A carrot will not negotiate. Fourth, test the consequence of failure. A light twig hoop in a quiet bed is one thing. A loaded plant beside a path needs stronger hardware, especially in wind or wet weather. If hand strength is limited, use ergonomic tools without apology. Renters should favor reversible methods and check local rules before burying waste. Leave some seed heads where wildlife needs them. Broad-spectrum pesticides reduce firefly prey, and excessive night lighting interferes with mating signals. I have gardened for 55 years. A fix that harms the garden around it is not a fix. Feel the soil, check the mulch, know the crop, and test the consequence. Which condition decides your choice most often? Hard soil, damp slug pressure, limited hand strength, or a small growing space? Which hand scale method will you try first, and what result will you watch for? Tell me below. Next time, I'm bringing back 17 free vegetable gardening hacks our grandparents used before every job came with a gadget. Start with one bed and watch what changes.